Hello everybody, this is Retcon here, and welcome back to another video. This is completely different to what I've been doing on the channel over the past few months. This is going to be a reaction video, my first actual ever reaction video on the channel. Not the first reaction video that I've ever done on YouTube, because on my other channels I have, that sadly got deleted, rest in peace to them. But this is going to be my first ever reaction video to this on this channel, and what we're going to be reacting to is a FNAF theory video by Hyper Droid, who is a FNAF YouTuber. He is also a fellow Australian, and he has apparently solved the retcon that Scott Cawthon mentioned about 8 years ago. And if some of you may or may not know, depends if you were here for the other channel that I had. I'm a massive FNAF fan. Have been for years, mainly ever since around just before the release of FNAF 4, I've been a huge fan. So yeah, we're here now, and I'm still a huge fan, and we're going to be reacting to Hyper Droid's video. Just to let you guys know that this video that you are about to watch, I have no involvement in, or none of the credit goes to me or anything. This all goes to Hyper Droid. So please, before you watch this video, I highly encourage you to click the link in the description, open up a new tab, watch his video in full by yourself, and then come back and watch it with me, please, because all the views deserve to go towards Hyper Droid, because I know that he puts a lot of effort into his videos. So, the man literally did a 24-hour Supreme Guide video on FNAF, which I have watched all of it, by the way. I'm not ashamed to admit. I didn't watch it in one sitting. I watched it, across multiple days. It took me a very long time to finish it, but I finished it. And the editing, and Hyper Droid said that it was all done by himself, which blew me away. So, I know for a fact this one is done by himself. He is incredible, highly underrated. Please go check him out. We're not going to be watching the video in full screen due to OBS issues. Hope that is okay with you guys. It should be fun, it's whatever. So, yeah, we're going to jump straight into it. I'm just going to minimize my webcam. There we go. So about there should do it. So, yeah, you can see all my recommended videos on here, but that's just whatever. So, hopefully you guys don't mind the minimum screen, but it's good because then you can glance down and you see that it's made by Hyper Droid, and be sure to go subscribe. Even though I'm not subscribed, but whatever. You know what? I should subscribe. I feel like it's kind of mean. Like, I'm watching his video, I'm not subscribed. It feels wrong. So I'm gonna subscribe to the guy. So yeah, I guess we're all good to go. Sorry, I haven't done this in a very long time, so I'm just checking to make sure everything's all good. We are all good. I've checked the volume, and when I did the recording, everything looked fine, so we should be good. So let's just jump straight into it. This is, I solved Scott's FNAF retcon 8 years later. It goes for 20 minutes, so we better jump straight into it.
The lore in the first few FNAF games was created as Scott Cawthon went along, meaning some ideas were later expanded upon or clarified in the following game or even following book. But before the release of FNAF 6, he actually revealed that one thing was retconned within the story that we didn't notice. So
I remember a YouTuber who did like an hour-long video, I forgot what his name was, but he was talking about how he thinks that the retcon was when after Sis Location released, because when it was FNAF 4, the first 3 games were believed to be a dream, and then he believed that when Scott released Sis Location and reverted all the 3 games back to reality, he thinks that's the retcon. I don't know if that's what Hyper Droid's going to be talking about in this video, we'll see.
So what was it? Today I'll present the multiple possibilities of what this retcon could be, such as the infamous stream theory, before we settle on the answer with a piece of evidence that we all missed, that possibly solidifies this as confirmed by Scott himself. So subscribe so we can hit 275,000 subscribers before the end of the month.
Make sure he hits that goal once again. Amazing FNAF
Like the video
YouTuber.
and let's finally solve the FNAF retcon. 8
only gonna be
years
pausing when it's
later.
important.
Quick disclaimer, while I personally think this might actually be confirmed, I'd still like to preface that this is just my opinion and is still just a theory no matter what. I have no actual say in what's
No
true or not,
attacking
even if
anyone.
I'm 99.9% certain in this. So without
Sorry
further
I'm sitting
ado,
awkwardly.
let's
I'm
get
sitting
into
on my
this
drum
theory.
stool, which
To
has
put
no
us all on the
backrest.
same page. Back on the 4th of September 2017, user Gravity Silence posed a question in the FNAF Reddit. Do you think that Scott has had the entire lore planned out since FNAF 1, or is he just making it up as he goes along?
No,
to which
there's
Scott
no way.
himself actually replied with a joke, stating all planned all along from the beginning of time. Never had to retcon anything. Which very quickly started a fire in the Reddit. And so the very next day, Scott made a full post titled The Retcon Issue. Within the post he states, "The truth is that I've done one actual retcon in the series, although I'm not going to say where it was." Later editing the post to include, "To be fair, the one retcon mentioned was integrated pretty seamlessly, and most people didn't notice. If it had caused problems or confusion, then I would have addressed it here." So what was FNAF's one retcon? Well, with that information in mind, we can actually make a simple theory killer checklist for whether something could be the retcon or not. 1. It has to occur before Pizzeria Simulator
Yep.
FNAF 6 was released
all know
at
this.
the end of 2017, as the retcon post obviously predates the game. 2. It has to be a noticeable retcon in the story, aka evidently changed. And 3. Although it wasn't a confusion point in the community, nor affected any theories to the point that it wasn't even noticed, aka wasn't something major. And honestly, the fact that this mystery has persisted to this day does actually prove that it was seamless. So let's begin diving deep into each theory about what this retcon could be and see which ones survive the checklist, as well as giving alternative explanations for them if they're not the retcon, which actually helps clean up some lore, so stick around to the end. The biggest theory that we've all seen about it that I must discuss is Dream Theory was retconned. Dream Theory,
Yeah.
created by MatPat from Game Theory, was
That was
born
a
from FNAF 4
massive
and
thing in the
theorized that
FNAF
everything in
community.
FNAF was simply a dream by the crying child in a coma after the bite of 83. A lot of people believe this to be true, and
I actually do believe this, to be honest, because why else would all the shit in FNAF 4 before when FNAF 4 released, why would all the shit be there that was there? You know? I know that sounds weird, but like even the 3 things that Scott put up during MatPat's live stream back in 2015, like I mean, surely Dream Theory was real. It was those 3 messages were just a massive nail on the coffin. Unless Scott was just leading us into the wrong direction, because Scott, knowing Scott, he probably has done that multiple times. But I don't know. Let's just keep watching.
some still do think that this was the original intention. So let's head over to the checklist. This would have been changed in the very next game's sister location, aka FNAF 5, so Bucks 1, check. It's of course a majorly noticeable change in the story, so Bucks 2, check, although that's actually the issue when it comes to Bucks 3. It's way too big of a change that redirects the entire direction of the lore from the bite forward, meaning we cannot check Bucks 3 and therefore this option is eliminated.
Yeah, but isn't
While
it a
may
major
have been
change,
believable
though?
at the time. With all due respect to MatPat, of course, the theory simply turned out to be incorrect. The biggest point proving that, which I think a lot of people forgot, is actually the fact that MatPat himself debunked the theory and went against it a single week later, telling us the many problems with it and then even detailing a timeline of events to include FNAF 4 alongside the other games. Not only this, but Scott even replied to a post soon after about how Dream Theory should jokingly die, stating, "I know, right? Who came up with this anyway?"
Then
which
what
was
was the
the
whole
start
thing
of
on
as many
Tuesday?
jokes about the theory ever since.
Then what was the whole thing about, sorry, I want to quickly mention this, and it will be hard with Hyper Droid talking as well, but what was the whole point of, then what was the whole point of the 3 things that Scott put up? Unless it was something else, but, okay.
even as recently as the movie featuring a book titled Dream Theory. But then what alternative explanation could I give for why the tiny toy Chica would be missing her beak?
Yes.
Well, MatPat wasn't actually that far off way back then, as to what some, including me, currently theorize it to mean, that it was a hint that the toy animatronics were actually based on these old toys, with this tiny toy Chica having a detachable beak inspiring them to give the new Chica a detachable beak too, explaining why they're all called the toy animatronics, despite only ever being called the new animatronics in universe, with Phone Guy even calling Pre-Mangle literally just Foxy.
Yeah.
Similar to the other two hints, these weren't meant to be anything massive that solved the entire lore in one foul swoop. The hint about the misunderstanding? Simply about the crying child seeing Afton put an employee in a suit. The hint about all 4 games being one story? Simply to guide us away from thinking one game didn't happen or one game didn't matter. So while I do understand why some believe Dream Theory to be the retcon, it simply can't be because it was debunked soon after and changes quite literally everything we knew about the story. Not so seamless. So now we've eliminated Dream Theory, let's move on to the next biggest theory about the retcon that also comes from FNAF 4, suggesting that the contents in the FNAF 4 box was retconned. This isn't even a baseless accusation, as Scott,
yes. Oh, wait, he's probably going to say it.
has gone on record to state that the contents of the box have changed
Yes,
multiple
Indoor
times,
goes interview back in
even
2018.
recently stating that what was inside basically doesn't even matter anymore. Although heading over to the checklist, and this one actually
Which is
breaks
pretty
all
weird.
3 rules. Think about it, the box was never actually open to us. We never saw what the true contents of the box were.
You can
And
open it in the
until
game
Scott
files,
directly
though,
told us they
which is
were
pretty
changed
cool.
in the Dorko interview after Ultimate Custom Night released in 2018, we couldn't have ever known that to be true. No matter if it was changed once, twice, or even a billion times, we wouldn't have ever known it was changed a single time if it weren't for that interview. Scott's statement about the box comes 2 whole games after the retcon post itself, and therefore makes it an unnoticeable change. And not only that, but it's undeniably one of FNAF's biggest mysteries to this day, and one of the biggest confusion points that Scott has talked about multiple times, meaning all 3 rules are actually broken. Continuing
Fair
on,
enough.
and we have the theory that the gender of the puppet's spirit was retconned. This comes from the fact that back in FNAF 2 we get a secret minigame showing us the murder of the child that goes on to possess the puppet.
Oh
as
yeah,
shown
and
by
Freddy
its
says
jump scare
save
straight
him.
after. Although during this minigame we audibly hear the letters spelt out. SAVEHIM. Save him.
Yes.
Later in the story though, we then get more information on the same event, and the child within
That
it
it
in
was
FNAF 6,
Charlie,
where we learn
and
that the
it
child
was a
is actually a
female.
girl named Charlie, the daughter of Henry. This is a change. But heading to the checklist, and this immediately breaks the first rule. We didn't know that the puppet's
yes, that
possessor
is
was now a
correct.
girl at all. At the time, since the retcon post predates FNAF 6's release. While Charlie did exist in the novel trilogy, there was absolutely nothing connecting her character to the death of the puppet's possessor at the
Exactly.
time. Mainly due to that very fact that it was Save Him, which would have debunked that theory at the time, making this change unnoticeable at the time too.
Fair enough.
Finally, it's also not seamless. We all immediately picked up on the fact that it was changed in FNAF 6. So what is it if it's not the retcon? Well, while it could just be a second retcon, like fellow FNAF theorist ID's Fantasy suggests, the he could actually be referring to the puppet animatronic itself. Since not only are we playing this minigame after the child is already dead, therefore we literally cannot save the child, but later games like Ultimate Custom Night continue to use he for the puppet, despite us knowing that it's possessed by Charlie by that point.
Ah,
so
so
this
like the
theory also doesn't
animatronic,
survive the
like,
checklist
just
and is eliminated.
main animatronic
Similar to
part
that
is a
theory, there
male.
is another one
That's
coming
fair-
from
that's fair
good old
enough.
MatPat, stating that the crying child possessing the puppet was retconned. This theory comes from that very same save him statement that we just discussed, connecting the 2 children due to their constantly crying nature, and his striped shirt matching the puppet's striped arms. Although mid-development on FNAF 4, Scott changed it to make it so the crying child was a separate new character, with nothing to do with the other kid. While I can see where he's coming from, and it isn't even a bad theory about the original intention of the crying child, and it might actually hold true, when we actually head to the checklist, it does succeed rule 1, but then unfortunately fails rules 2 and 3. This change would have been made during development, and so before the game even released to us. Therefore, we couldn't have possibly noticed that it was retconned at all. Only Scott would know. Not only that, but if it were true, it would be quite a big change, splitting one of the most important characters in the plot into 2 entirely different characters.
Yeah,
so
that'd be
while
weird.
I can't even debunk that it may have actually been Scott's intention while creating FNAF 4, I can safely say that it isn't the retcon itself, and is eliminated
enough.
from the list of possibilities.
So what is it
The
then?
next possibility is that the original owner of Fredbear's Family Diner was retconned. If you're confused, in FNAF 2, as you know, we get
Really? Because he said No, you said Fredbear's Family Diner, yeah.
Eliminated from the list of possibilities. The next possibility is that the original owner of Fredbear's Family Diner was retconned.
Fredbear, what? Am I dumb? Or weren't they both done by William Afton and Henry? Fredbear's Family Diner. Or was that just William? No, I'm pretty sure it was both William and Henry that had Fredbear's Family Diner together. Or was that not the original... Or were they both not the original owners before it was shown that they were? I know that may sound confusing, but let's just see what he has to say.
If you're confused, in FNAF 2, as you know, we get calls from the phone guy, which within one of these calls, he states,
we're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
Which implies that there's only one owner of Fredbear's Family Diner, despite us later knowing that Henry was actually the co-owner of the location in the first FNAF book, The Silver Eyes.
So I was right.
Heading to the checklist, and on the surface it seems to actually pass the first two. Although not only is the third rule broken, as it changes the entire backstory of the restaurant and company, but when you realize that we didn't actually know if Henry was even in the game lore or not by
I just realized what I said earlier, like, yeah, but isn't it a major change? I just realized that it can't be a major change. I'm an idiot.
Time the retcon post was made, it ends up breaking rule 1 and 2 as well. We didn't know Henry carried over into the game timeline until FNAF 6 released
that
with
is
the
true.
audio
He did
HRY
not appear until
223,
FNAF 6.
commonly believed to stand for Henry 2023. But wait, we do know that this was changed though, so how isn't it a second retcon? Well, the first and most likely reason is actually due to the fact that the phone guy says it. Right before he says that line, we can hear that he's stumbling over his words with stress about the incident, and literally almost forgets the name of the location itself, questioning whether it was even right, so it can very easily be written off as phone guy simply making a mistake. Not only that, but right after that statement he says,
"They're closed for years though, I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down."
Which anybody does inherently imply multiple people. Although if you're not satisfied with this answer, another way to make sense of this quote is that within that same call we hear that the phone guy has learned about what's going on, and even mentions the concerns about previous employees. So it's highly likely that they figured out that the previous employee in the location was actually William Afton under the disguise. And so the original owner they're trying to track down is actually Henry after all. Theories aside, and no matter what the alternative explanation for that line is, it cannot be the retcon that Scott was talking about, since it breaks all three rules. Speaking of the phone guy, and the next contender is that the animatronics existing for 20 years was retconned. Again, if you're confused, even earlier in FNAF 1, phone guy says this interesting line.
"If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too."
Which wouldn't make too much sense when considering that by that time the retcon post was made, the earliest date in the timeline that we knew of was 1983. This does seem to fit our checklist at first glance, although there's actually a few problems with this being the retcon. The biggest problem comes from listening to the full quote, specifically the delivery of it.
The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night, but do I blame them? No. If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
While people focus on the 20 years detail specifically, the entire context around that quote and the cadence of his voice delivery heavily implies that it's meant to be a joke, and simply over-exaggerating for the sake of over-exaggerating. Really just
That is true, but knowing Scott, he probably put that in there to say that they have been around for 20 years, but then again, at the same time, it could be just a joke. I don't know. But usually when Scott does something in the FNAF games, it's very intentional. Sorry if my webcam's moving, I'm just repositioning my laptop because it was annoying me that it was on a slight angle. I think I should be still in view. I should be.
Haven't been cleaned for a while. The animatronics don't actually get quirky and they don't actually get given baths. I always took this as a joke. Just like the previous theory, it comes down to the phone guy actually meaning every single thing that he says, and everything being undoubtedly truthful with no room for error, which doesn't really work with a character as stumbly and as jokeful as the phone guy, who makes multiple jokes and mistakes in these same calls, as I'll show on screen right now just in case you don't believe me. Although even though I do heavily, extremely believe that it was simply the phone guy over-exaggerating, and it wasn't meant to be a serious detail, let's play devil's advocate. advocate and say that it was meant to be taken seriously, and that the animatronics really did exist 20 years ago within the isolated story of FNAF 1. Was it retconned in the future games? Well, that's the thing, still no. We know due to FNAF 2 that they started to retrofit the originals, that eventually become the FNAF 1 animatronics, with the new technology. But Phone Guy actually tells us that they were just so ugly, and specifically that they smelt, and so the company went another route, leading to the toys, directly telling us that they still smelled from the original location, and they weren't even clean during this process, which is directly referencing this very quote that we're talking about now, about them still smelling. So with that in mind, as well as the fact that we don't actually know for certain when FNAF 1 takes place, nor when the animatronics were first created, there was no way of us actually knowing in 2017 that this statement isn't true, therefore breaking Rule 2. All in all, the quote seemed to be Phone Guy exaggerating and simply joking, although even if you want to take it as a serious piece of information, it wasn't a noticeable change in the lore due to our limited information on their creation in 2017, meaning it breaks the second rule and cannot be the retcon. Even with the future games, we're learning that while the first Freddy's location was revealed to in fact open up in 1983, which again we didn't know in 2017, these characters existed a lot earlier than that either way. Speaking of the first location, and the next theory is William being charged and convicted was retconned. This comes from the fact that within the secret FNAF 1 newspapers, one has the title 5 children now reported missing, suspect convicted. Later reading, while the suspect was charged, the bodies themselves were never found.
Oh no, he was in jail,
which goes against the fact
charged.
that years after these first murders, William was still freely running around in both the FNAF 2 location and later the FNAF 1 location, which would be a pretty hard thing to be free to do after being found guilty with 5 counts of first-degree murder. Heading over to our checklist, and this does actually check all 3 boxes, but so did the last one at first glance, so are there any arguments that could be made against this one? No, not really. Wait, is this really the retcon? Well, not only is there a piece of evidence that directly tells us that this plot point was, yes, intentionally retconned from the story, that I'll get into properly in a second, but we do know from the following game, FNAF 2, that William was still roaming around freely in 1987, years after the murders, where he even does this whole thing again in the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And then in the next game, FNAF 3, we see him still roaming around freely, entering the FNAF 1 location and breaking down the animatronics before inevitably being springtrapped. So there is actually evidence in the literal following games that he wasn't charged and convicted, but there's also a piece of evidence that I've been teasing since the start of the video. So let's just get into it. Within the Silver Eyes, we learn a lot about—
Yeah, because it said he was charged, but because the bodies weren't found, he wasn't jailed. Like, he wasn't locked up. But he was convicted. Or am I wrong? I swear that because the bodies weren't found, he didn't get jail time. But he was... Or am I completely wrong? I swear... What? Oh, because I swear he said that... I swear that because William Afton, he was charged, but he wasn't... He didn't get jail time because the bodies weren't found. But he was convicted. I might be overthinking this too much.
the murders, and specifically the police's perspective on it all, through one of our main protagonists, Police Chief Clay Burke. Clay remembers how the whole police department knew that it was William, and that he was indeed arrested, although explains that there were no bodies, they were never found, and without their bodies, justice penalizes the guilty, but it must also protect the innocent, which seems to prove he was never charged/convicted in itself. But then within that same book we also get direct proof with the quote, "But there had been no evidence, there had been no bodies, and so there could be no charge." No charge. That's right, this explicitly tells us that the charge we read about in the FNAF 1 newspapers no longer exists in the story, which also means the conviction is waved away too. So even if you had any doubts that FNAF 2 and FNAF 3 directly showed us it was retconned, the Silver Eyes is the exact moment we can read for ourselves that the plot point was changed and removed from the story intentionally. There's even more proof in the future too, with FNAF Help Wanted containing a death screen that specifically hints at it, with a message nothing was ever proven in a court of law, meaning him being convicted is impossible. This being the retcon makes a lot of sense. Within the isolated story of FNAF 1, the murderer was indeed locked away, but as the story needed to expand and the murderer needed to return, Scott simply retconned that plot point out of the canon. As I mentioned, William was indeed arrested, although that doesn't...
So pretty much ever since FNAF 2, it's been retconned, because otherwise, yeah, William Afton would have been gone by now. Because it makes sense that why he made that plot in FNAF 1, because he never planned to make FNAF 2 in the first place. The only reason he started making more FNAF games was because the first one blew up. So he's like, right, I need to make a sequel. So if the first game didn't blow up, it just would have been the first game, and it would have been just this. It would have been just the story that 5 children were... Yeah. Oh, so he did... Yeah, so he did get locked up. Okay. Okay, the thing about how he got no jail time or anything would have to do with the whole thing with the silver eyes and other things, but yes, I was right, but I was wrong on where it was placed. I'm an idiot. My bad. Yeah, so the suspect has been charged, the bodies themselves were never found. Yep. Yeah, so... Yeah, that's crazy to think, though. Like, this might have never been retconned if the first game didn't blow up. That's actually crazy to think. So it would have originally been... If it was just the first game, it would have been, there was a killer. We don't know his name. We never find out the name of the game. We never find out what his name is until... We don't find out his name in the second game. We just knew it was the purple guy. We don't even find out his name in the third and fourth game, yeah? Do we not? When do we find out that his name is actually William Afton? Is it the third game? No. Because from what I remember, the first time we actually hear his name being mentioned in game is in Sister Location. But in the previous series... I don't know. I'm overthinking. We need to get onto this video, otherwise this video is going to be too long.
He was charged nor convicted. As the process goes, from an arrest / being detained, which is sending him in for police questioning and things like that, later to a charge, which is accusing them of committing a crime with serious evidence, and then way further at the end of the process is when a conviction happens, which is when the person is officially declared guilty by a jury in court. So for this newspaper to still be true and not be retconned from the story, the police would have found serious evidence against William and he would have been found guilty in court. But thanks to the following games and the Silver Eyes though, we know that William was never charged specifically due to the lack of evidence, the buddies, and so the case against him was thrown out before it even reached the court and got anywhere close to a conviction. But wait, what if the quote was instead meant to be for Henry and the retcon was simply shifting the convicted from William to Henry instead? Well, not only would that in itself break the first and second rules, as Henry didn't even exist in the games until FNAF 6, and so it couldn't have been noticed, but also because the Silver Eyes also directly answers that too, with the quote, "At first he had suspected Henry, just like so many others around town, but Clay had resisted, had delayed having him arrested, and sure enough they came to William Afton," which explicitly tells us that while they did all suspect Henry at first, they never actually made the arrest before they found their killer in William. The biggest part of all of this to me is that there seems to be no clear alternative explanation for this. This coming from a factual newspaper means it's actually unable to be written off easily as a joke or exaggerating or anything similar. And alternate theories putting Henry as the convicted don't work either, since we know that he wasn't even arrested from the books, but also because he
the only two people that Henry has killed is himself and Michael because of the FNAF 6 fire. The animatronics don't count because it's just their spirits in there. Not actual physical human beings. So the only human beings that he has physically killed is himself and Michael Afton, because he was the one who lit the FNAF 6 building on fire, so technically whoever dies in that is his fault. So, technically Henry has killed someone, but he mainly did it because he thought Michael would want to be there and die in the fire alongside his father. So technically, Henry is a murderer. When you think about it, Henry is technically a murderer because he did kill another human being. He does say that, I have a feeling where you're right where we want to be, but at the same time, Michael didn't say like, oh, can you burn me? I'm in. So technically, Henry did kill Michael without his consent, even though like Michael was probably like, yeah, I want to be here, and Henry assumed it. He assumed. We know that he didn't go up to Michael and ask. He just said, I have a feeling, which means that they never had a conversation about Michael, that both of them never had a conversation about them getting burnt. So technically, Henry is a murderer in a sense, but obviously they can't do anything because Henry killed himself in the fire as well. On purpose, by the way. So, I don't know. Technically, Henry is a murderer, but it was all for the right reasons, which obviously in real life that wouldn't fly, but in a video game series like this, it makes sense. I don't know. Once again, I'm overthinking this too much.
Didn't even exist as a character in the games until FNAF 6 released. This is why I spent the majority of this video trying to debunk and give alternative explanations for the other options, because I'm so certain that this is indeed the retcon. This option is the only one with no real argument against it, and is actually 100% confirmed to be the case in the books at the very minimum. I've seen it argued that Scott simply didn't understand the meaning of the word convicted, but I think that's quite a large assumption to make, especially considering that he could have easily used suspect charged for the title like he uses within the story itself, yet he didn't. He chose to use convicted, and also the fact that it actually works perfectly fine within the isolated lore from FNAF 1 itself. So in conclusion, with all of this information combined, William murders the 5 kids at Freddy's in the off-camera backroom, putting their bodies inside the suits. At first, the police suspect Henry, who was so shaken by the event that he seemed guilty, and they almost move him for the arrest until they find video surveillance that identifies William as the man in the mascot. And so the next morning they arrest him on suspicion of murder, although they couldn't find the bodies, and so there was no evidence that he even murdered anyone, meaning the case against him was thrown out before a charge could even be made, and he was a free man. It's even stated in the Silver Eyes that after all of this, William literally leaves town, and there was nothing the police could do to stop him. All of this proving that Scott Cawthon's one confirmed retcon before FNAF 6 released, that was a noticeable change in the story, while not being a confusion point in the community and barely noticed, was in fact that the newspapers in FNAF 1 stated that the murderer was charged and convicted. But before we end off, are there any other retcons in FNAF? Well, luckily for us, Scott actually answered that very question in the post about the retcon. Quote, while it's true that the story has developed new details over time that may not have been planned from the beginning, that doesn't mean that the pieces don't fit together as a whole. There is a lot of information crammed into these games, and there will always be details that I don't convey 100% as intended. I try to clear up those items, but I'm certainly not retconning things at will. I have more respect for the community than that. So while people joke that FNAF has been retconned about 100 times, or that Scott changes the lore every other day, I genuinely don't think there's been
No, I think the lore just gets changed. Technically, the lore changes every time a game releases. Because every time a game releases, you're either adding new pieces to the story, or you're adding in things that have not been explained from the previous games. So technically, if you go to the nitty-gritty of it, technically the lore changes every single time a game releases. Because with Secret of the Mimic coming up on the 13th of June, which I will be doing a video on that, by the way, maybe a live stream. Probably not, but probably just a video, but whatever. That comes out on the 13th of June, but whatever, that's not the case. With Secret of the Mimic, the lore's going to change, because originally before the Mimic was even a thing, before there was a book mentioned about it, before he appeared in Ruin, before the Mimic was even thought about. Like, originally in the lore, there was no such thing as a Mimic, and the Mimic wasn't, and Edward Murray wasn't one of the original creators of the mascot costumes, and the Mimic wasn't one of the original animatronics. But with Ruin and the books, and with Secret of the Mimic, the lore has now been changed to that the Mimic was one of the original animatronics. Edward Murray was one of the original creators of, like, the mascot costumes. Because we can tell because of, like, you know, there's like a dog, there's a lion, there's an elephant, there's a bloody mushroom. So, and, you know, lore changed when Security Breach came out. Because when it was just FNAF 4, originally there was no such thing as a Mega Pizzaplex, now there is. So, yes, the lore pretty much changes every single time a game is released. Doesn't mean that things have been retconned, no. Because like Scott said, he doesn't do it at will, he has more respect for the community than that. And for the past, 10 years, we've known this at this point. So, also, happy 10 years to FNAF 3, by the way. It's crazy to think that that game is 10 years. And FNAF 4 is going to be 10 years as well this year. That's mental. And the next year, FNAF 4 will be 10 years old. Jesus. Anyway, so yeah. The lore does change every time a game comes out. But that doesn't mean that retcons are happening every single time a game is released, so...
One retcon in the story, where a plot point has been actively and intentionally changed and or reverted. People will immediately point to Burntrap, but in Security Breach itself, we see that while the whole ending is animated, which admittedly, yes, of course it makes you believe that it's the canon ending, it's actually just another 2-star ending, with the only 3-star ending in the game that does later get revealed to be the canon ending being Princess Quest.
Yes, we all know this because in Ruin, we see the Princess Quest sword stabbed into the Princess Quest 3 machine, proving that it is canon. And obviously we have the whole thing with Princess Quest 4 being in Hellblazer 2. People debating whether both... that's why a lot of people are debating, because the other ending is that you get stuffed into the mask bot that gives the mask to Cassie, which we know actually does happen because we play as Cassie when that also happens in Ruin. So a lot of people are debating whether both endings are canon, or the first ending is. I believe it to be the case that they're both canon but in different ways. I believe that the first ending does actually happen because we see the mask being given to Cassie at the end of when the staff bots come at, the nightmare bots come at you. And we know that the mask thing does happen in the game because we literally play as Cassie when that actually happens in Ruin. We're just seeing it from a different point of view. But in terms of Princess Quest 4, I think going into the arcade and all that, I don't think that's canon. I think the whole thing of Glitch Trap, and I think the whole point of that was just to show that Glitch Trap is never coming back, or William Afton as a person. He may, get mentioned, but I don't think he's going to ever physically appear, or if it's mainly just his Glitch Trap entity. So I think that's just their way of showing that Glitch Trap is done, but I don't think, the actual events of you going into Princess Quest 4 and then the princess taking over is canon, because there's a sword in the Princess Quest thing showing that the princess is free, so it doesn't make sense for her to be coming back in Hellblazer 2. That makes sense, I believe, from my own perspective. If you guys have any arguments against that, please let me know in the comments below. But anyway,
it's
I'm done.
Almost exactly like Sister Location,
Almost.
where we get a whole
We've got 30
epic
seconds
boss
left.
battle ending
I'll
with
try and
the
shut
main
up.
villain, only to learn that it isn't even the canon ending. It wasn't retconned, it was just never the canon ending to begin with.
Exactly, there are multiple endings
it
just for the
really
gameplay
seemed like
fun.
it was. So all in all, I truly believe that we have the answer to FNAF's one retcon. And while I don't like using the word confirmed, I do have to admit that the Silver Eyes does explicitly state it to be removed from the story, and therefore I do personally believe that this answer might actually be confirmed. But do you you agree? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all for 250,000 subscribers. Subscribe for
Congratulations,
more,
you
and
deserve
have
it.
a great day or night. Bye.
Wait, what did it say at the end? What did it say at the end?
Thank you all for 250,000 subscribers. Subscribe for more, and have a great day or night. Bye.
FNAF timeline coming December, theory plus storytelling version. Okay. Alright, everyone. That was amazing. That was awesome. I'm going to give that a like, because that was awesome. That was really detailed. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, yeah, I'm going to put my webcam back to full screen. So, yeah, well done, Hyper Droid. That was amazing. If you are watching this at all, Hyper Droid, hi, and you did an amazing job. Honestly, you really did. That was an awesome video. I could never... Sorry if, like, my computer's being slow. It is a pretty shitty computer in some aspects, but yeah. You did an amazing job at this. I did not suspect... I did not even think for a second that the whole thing about, you know, William Afton being convicted in the first game, but then it shows that in the second game there's another murder and he's running free, and by FNAF 3 he's still alive and he's still running around. So that's actually a good clue. So well, I guess we'll see in the future if that's right. I don't know if Scott's actually going to ever come out and say that what Hyper Droid said is 100% correct. Once again, this seems like this is the 100% correct thing, but once again, it can't be officially deemed 100% correct until Scott pretty much says as it is. And knowing Scott, he'll probably never do that, but if he ever does, that'd be interesting. So, yeah, we've been going on for 41 minutes. So pretty much we took up double the time of Hyper Droid's video. So, yeah, thank you all so much for watching. This is my first reaction video. I plan to do more. This was just going to be my first one because I've always wanted to know in the past what the retcon has been, because, you know, I like, whenever that appeared as a comment, like, you know, oh, like, you remember Scott saying it was retcon? That always came to the back of my mind, like, what was the retcon? Because it actually has bugged me for so many years. Like, it wasn't something that I thought about 24/7. Oh, that's just a sad thing to think about. But it would come up in the back of my mind occasionally, you know, if someone brought it up on a video saying, like, oh, you know, Scott said something about a retcon, you know, like, will he ever mention what it is? And then I think about, yeah, well, what the hell is the retcon? Like, he said that he retconned it once, but it wasn't a major change. And he only said that he would address what the retcon is if it was a major change. So, I don't know. But, do you think, because in some aspects, William Afton not being convicted and running free is technically a major change, so, if you think about it? Because William Afton is the main antagonist of the original FNAF lore, like pre-Help Wanted, like from 1 to UCN. So I don't know if that's really much of a major change when you think about it. Like, he is the main antagonist, and we see him, you know, running around, and in the first game it says, like, he has been locked up in jail, so he shouldn't be running around. But once again, I might be overthinking it. It's probably not a major change, but, you know, at first it may seem like a major change, but then again, Hyper Droid sort of explained why it's not really a major change. I don't know. My brain is not really working today. I don't know why, but it never really does work. Don't worry about it. But, yeah, once again, I'm probably overthinking it. I should probably stop rambling. But, yeah, that was a really good video. Give me other videos that you think that I should react to. If it's something completely inappropriate, I will not watch it. I will make sure to have a look at what it is first, you know, skim past and make sure it's good enough to react to, in terms of, like, if it's appropriate or not to react to, not if it's, like, you know, not if the video is poorly edited or some shit. I don't really care about that, as long as it's appropriate to watch, to react to on YouTube. But, yeah, but once again, I really hope you did watch Hyper Droid's video first. If you haven't, even if you watched the full video with me, please just go watch the full video again with just Hyper Droid, without me pausing it and talking over Hyper Droid and stuff like that. Because, once again, all the views deserve to go to him. He's the one that put in the time and effort to make this video. I'm just a guy that just loaded up my computer, put my webcam over my YouTube, and just played his video and reacted to it. So all the views deserve to go to him. 100%. So yeah, Hyper Droid, once again, well done. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next week for another video. Peace.